talking about truth, I like analysts and people who can cut through the noise like a knife in butter. And one of those is our good friend Tom Teague, friend of the show. Tom, thanks for coming on, man.
You're welcome.
Wow, there's so much. I don't want to say disinfo because that term is kind of bad, but there's just so much chaos and a lot of information.
Yeah.
What is happening? What do you think, in your opinion?
Well, I think disinfo is not far from what it is. I was listening to somebody on CNBC this morning, and this is the last guy that I would expect to inform me about what kind of Iranian mines they're using in the Gulf or in the Straits.
You think somebody told him to say that, Tom?
Yeah, I just think that the amount of people, like, we live in a different age where everyone thinks that they're entitled, firstly, and secondly, that they're informed because, or they need to, they know what's going on. I think people are very much in the dark about this whole operation. And I think, that, it's hard to understand. The real big thing is, Iran is a colossal country. It's hard to understand the different factions of government that are probably at odds with one another right now. You've got hardliners versus you've got people who want to come out of this thing and still exist. I don't think it seems like there's very little unity there. So I think it's tough for us to understand. And I think Trump is playing this game where he's not giving them anything either. They're making these bold statements and he's making bold statements back to him. And, he made this, we're going to destroy a great civilization tweet, and everyone started panicking, but somehow it got him to the table. I think they took him sort of at his word that he was willing to go through with this. So we'll see. But I think that the important thing is they're trying to open up the straits. Oil price reflected that yesterday. Complete sort of like free fall. It's back up today because I think, people are questioning, what's happening in Iran, what group is saying what. Are they going to hold through to this thing? Is there going to be, more missiles launched, more interference? But I think the general picture is that Trump does probably want to avoid some long drawn out conflict here. And I think that, the Iranians probably also, there's some element of self-preservation. So, I mean, I think those things are kind of obvious, and markets have had a huge bounce back as a result of it. I think we priced in the sort of worst case scenario, and we're kind of creeping back from that.
And that, also the dispersion and decentralization during the time of war, the decapitation of the leadership. You got commanders out in the field that may not know what the rest of the organism is doing. And so they're launching missiles, or it may be all coordinated, but, I wouldn't be sending electronic commerce or texts right now. I'd be sending a donkey with a note.
If you believe it or you don't believe it, this whole like heart signature thing that they were saying, how they found this airman. If they have things like that, then I don't think I think the disparity between technologies in the two warring countries is pretty severe, probably bigger than it's ever has been. And I think you have to assume that the U.S. is a lot more effective than we have been in past. Like, you go back to when we tried was it Desert Eagle, when we tried to rescue the hostages?
Desert One, yes.
Yeah, Desert One. You go back and how difficult it was and the lessons we learned. I think we're so much more advanced in that now. Yeah. And, these people that are talking about, Trump hasn't really done anything. We've managed to kill 20 of their most, senior leaders and find them wherever they are. So I think it is working. I think the pressure is working. And I agree with you. I don't think they're going to be able to. I mean, like you were showing in the clip before this, you were showing like the Iranian propaganda of the missiles. I mean, I find it. I'm sure that we know where a lot of this stuff is, and it just gets more and more revealed. We've got like swarm drones that are their own AI, where we can see stuff. So I think, I think they're legitimately, being told that they need to, cooperate at some level. But, as you said, you don't know if it's like, one part or that's the whole part. And I think it's designed. Iran's designed to operate in this way because the longer the straits are impaired, the more there's going to be pressure from the international community to resolve the problem and give Iran different off ramps that they can still do what they want to do.
You know what? I've gotten to where there's so much chaos, information flow, bad information flow, narratives being created. When I see somebody coming out and saying, blah, 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 you got to do this, this is what's happening, I immediately just think, okay, who are you working for? Who's paying you? What agenda are you trying to push? And what is your end goal? And I think people need to look at all of this influencer talk that way and see really
100%. And also look at what they've said in the past and have they been right about it? Right.
Exactly.
I mean, it's amazing. People start talking about the Financial Times and telling me what's going on in that. And I'm like, who even listens to that anymore? I mean, it's just pure propaganda and they're wrong about everything. So yeah, I 100% agree with you. Everyone's on the take, it seems.
X, yeah, exactly. X is just a show. I mean, just a shit show for lack of a better term. I mean, you go on there and it's just it's diarrhea. I mean,
it's turned into what the media it has become, right? It's initially you had these voices that said great things and now they're all competing for recognition and clicks, just like the media was. So they're saying anything to get attention and to A/B test their audience so they can figure out what people want to hear, and then they just go with that. And also, you know, just like the media was controlled by people, so is the Twitter sphere, or whatever you want to call it. People are getting paid to say things, so you got to be really, really careful. I mean, you know, with great respect, I mean, Tucker Carlson, I saw in a clip that you had on, he was like, why don't you just tell us the truth? Well, why, Tucker? Why do you deserve the truth? Like, I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but like, you're not going to know the truth, right? We don't know what's going on there on purpose. You know, if you had some huge international, like, you know, cooperative body that was deciding on this stuff, then you can release stuff. But basically everyone in Europe, all our allies, are not telling us what's going on. They're doing side deals, it would appear, with Iran. So like, we're not going to give people the honest answer right now. Like, some of this stuff is classified and it should be classified. You know, you can't tell people what you're thinking.
All right, let's move into the economic sphere. Several things. One, where do you think the U.S. dollar stands? I mean, I've heard a lot about petro yuan, you know, contracts going through the strait and all that. What do you think on the reserve currency issue?
Well, I think people are losing sight of the fact that's one very big, important, you know, thing on the agenda right now of the Trump administration. I think, you know, you had China and, you know, a lot of these other BRIC countries trying to move away from the dollar. I think that, you know, I look at Iran as Iran is like is a vestige of, you know, sort of, you know, the old Russia, China sort of axis. And, you know, to the extent that Trump is damaging that, I think part of it is obviously the dollar is going to remain very important. The other Gulf states are going to be using it. They seem very committed to it. There's been a splinter with these GCC countries in Iran. And now I think most of them would like to see the backside of Iran and like to see, you know, a change there. And, you know, at the very least, them not be a major force in the region, because they're attacking their neighbors, their so-called, you know, traditional sort of Muslim allies. They're going after them now. So I think part of this is reasserting the U.S.'s, you know, sort of empire and our control. And I think that the dollar will remain strong if this is a success. You know, it'll make it harder to move away from it.
Yeah. Very, very.
I think that's a very important. I think that's a very important plan. I don't think this is just, you know, Trump looking at it and saying we've got to do this just so we can benefit an ally like Israel. I think there's a lot of, you know, knock-on effects. One, this could inadvert. Like, I don't know if you've seen this, but, you know, in the Netherlands, they pumped cement into their gas wells so they could never be used. I read an article about Germany was flooding a coal mine so it could never be used again. These guys
blowing up their nuclear cooling towers.
They're out of their minds. I mean, so inadvertently, you know, the Orange Man might have saved these guys from a worse fate further down the road. because they're all going to hopefully wake up and recognize, they're sitting on big stockpiles and reserves of gas in these countries. France has it. Germany has it. The UK has it. UK's got like 20 billion barrels of oil. They need to get in there and invest in it so that they don't have this problem going on in the future. And the Straits of Hormuz is not like the critical artery for the world, one way or the other.
Well, your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
A warm welcome here at the National Press Club. Welcome to the journalists, welcome to the Embraer team, and welcome to the other guests that we have here. We're going to announce, and as some of you guessed it right when they came in, the first E2 order by an American operator. And that operator is Avello. We believe this is really a strategic shift to unlock profitability for the customer. I'm very pleased that we have Andrew Levy here as the CEO of Avello, and I'm very pleased to give the stage to share a little bit more about what Avello is going to do with the E2 195. Thank you very much.
Couldn't be more excited to be here as part of this historic announcement. We have such a great cultural fit as companies, so we're very, very excited to be Embraer's newest customer. We launched our airline in April of 21, and our target is focusing on small secondary airports of large metro areas. We've carried over 8 million customers since we started on 63,000 flights. And we've done all these things with 1,200 of the greatest crew members I could ever imagine having, and many of them are here with me today. This is the right airplane for us. It's going to open up opportunities for us that no other aircraft can serve. The best thing about the airplane, of course, is you will not find a middle seat on this airplane. It doesn't exist. We won't have any to offer. It's going to be the best cabin in the United States, and we're so excited about that. This is going to elevate our experience to the highest level, and we think our customers are absolutely going to love the airplane.
Well, that's a good point, because there's a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth on the Strait of Hormuz, and it's almost like the people who are on the opposition to the U.S. policy are getting hurt so bad that they're screaming that you have to get this strait open and you can't do it and you're weak. And well, we don't need to. We got all the gas we need. The only people that need it is Europe.
That's correct, right? And Asia,
yeah.
and Asia can't really. Asia's, from what I understand, Asia's kind of they don't have the gas. Europe actually has it.
Yeah.
So, all these feedstocks, all the helium and the fertilizer, nitrogen, all this stuff that are byproducts of refining, they could have that too. And what all these green, fanatics don't understand is you actually can't live without these things. There's no way around it. You can have all the solar panels you want. You're not going to have enough fertilizer to feed your population.
It's food, it's heat in the winter, it's air conditioning.
Yeah, it's very simple stuff.
It's transportation. I mean, it's getting pharmaceuticals to the store so you can buy them.
Correct.
I mean, it's real shit,
Yeah, they've been living under this false ideology, this typical leftist self-loathing death cult kind of stuff, and
anti-growth.
Anti-human, basically. We need less population, and it's not working. And hopefully this is a big wake-up call for these countries. They're going to realize that they can't go on with this kind of dependence on one region. And I think that's one reason they've been so reticent to let us use bases, because they're trying to protect that, because they've made a huge bet that that's always going to be safe, and they don't have to invest in those industries themselves because they don't like it and they want more control over their population. And hopefully that's going to change.
I was talking to a young German person recently, or living in Germany, a young kid, and they're they're propagandized. I mean, we have Eurobyte show, which is very anti-propaganda, but the average, Joe Bag of Donut barista in Germany is completely propagandized. And
they've been
I don't know how you break that. I don't know how you break that, man.
Well, I mean, I guess when people start standing in line for gas and are cold in the winter, they start recognizing, or they can't get food in the grocery store, they start recognizing something's going on. And
they get drafted. They get drafted. I mean, they're stopping.
Yeah, correct. Well, that's the other thing. They can't leave the country without letting them know.
Yeah.
I mean, what war they're ready to fight, I have no idea. What are they gonna take on Russia still? I mean,
Yeah.
Russia's gonna end up they're gonna end up walking back and kissing Putin's butt and getting gas from Russia if this thing persists.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Wow.
Completely self done.
And NATO is on its way out, it seems.
Yeah.
What about China? That's the sleeper, right? I mean, you don't hear much out of them.
Well, what I've heard, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard they've been sort of exhorting Iran to sort of come to the table and make a deal. China came in this thing with like 120 days of reserves, and China needs more oil per GDP than America does, and they don't have it themselves. They don't have nearly enough to get through. So at some point, they're going to start feeling the squeeze on their economy. I mean, and no one seems to talk about the fact that charging ships to go through the sea is a violation of maritime law. You can't, it's like a troll under a toll bridge. It's piracy. So I think it's ridiculous to, there's no infrastructure that they've built that people are using, like the Panama Canal. It's a different story. We're just talking about a waterway that they're saying we won't mine it or blow up your ship if you pay us money. This has got to stop.
It's protection racket, man.
Yeah.
It's mafia stuff. Do you
Totally.
think we're going to get in a bigger conflict? Where do you think the ceasefire is going to go? There's a lot of troops in the region right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that keeps the pressure on Iran to do the right thing. I'm hopeful that Iran will. I mean, Trump put out some interesting, Truth Social things about how we were going to work with Iran to dismantle its nuclear capabilities. I saw Pete Hegseth say that. I don't even know what that means. Like, we're at war with these guys right now. So does that mean there's a faction of the government that's willing to play ball with us and move on? I think the whole region is desperate for a change. These sort of Cold War legacies, again, Iran is a big one of, we're just going to fight Israel the whole time and sponsor terrorism in the region. I think most of the other Gulf states want to get away from that and develop their own economies and grow as they were doing before this conflict happened, like Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Qatar. They're all looking towards the future and AI and being in the global economy and being big financial centers, at the detriment of Europe, which gave all that up, because of socialism.
And New York City.
Yeah, correct. And so I think that it's, I think everyone wants to sort of move away from that. And hopefully within Iran, you have people that see the future and understand that the best thing you can do is not build some huge military so that you can antagonize the U.S. and its allies.
Yeah.
Everyone's better off if they recognize Israel and just move on, to be honest with you, because they'll save themselves a lot of heartbreak and they'll develop their economies.
It would also take away one of the, I would call it an excuse or a leverage Israel has to expand, right? I mean, if nobody's trying to destroy them, then you don't need buffer zones. You don't need all that stuff.
Correct. Correct.
Interesting. What about Dubai? You mentioned that. What's happening there? A lot of stuff, people saying that, Dubai's done, it's finished. I don't believe that, because
I don't think it's done. There's no way it's done. I mean, it's a shell of its former self right now. I mean, people whom I know that have houses there or apartments and were living there for periods of time, that they're staying away. People that are there say they walk around and they get texts saying shelter immediately right now. So I think obviously people cleared out of there and want to until this conflict's over, but I don't think the longer term these places have a lot of money and they have a lot of petrodollars coming in. So they're not going to. They were booming, and they were, and Dubai is a great example. I think 80% of Dubai's economy is related to the real estate, the finance, everything that's going on there. So I think that they want to move away from their own personal reliance on just oil. And so I think it'll come back. It'll just take some time to convince people that the region's safe. And these sort of things, with Iran, if you did have, some sort of shift in the way the government looks at things, this could be very quick. The other thing that's happening, I think, now is that, Saudi Arabia, they have labor that is 24/7 basically, so they can build more pipelines. They can circumvent going through the Straits of Hormuz, and they're already shipping I think about 7 million barrels of oil a day across the country they were shipping 10 through the Straits of Hormuz. I think they're getting most of it now through these pipelines that go over land. So, one way or the other is Iran's ability to terrorize the region and hold the world hostage every time they don't like something that's going on is dissipating. So that's a positive for the region.
I would agree. Last question. The big elephant in the room, it's still not over in Ukraine, and Russia is still taking territory. I still think there's going to be some kind of deal. I mean, just look at what Trump is doing with Russia, allowing them to sell oil to Cuba, et cetera. I think there's going to be some kind of economic cooperation there. What do you think?
I think that, I mean, personally, Russia is not our enemy.
Mhm.
You may not like Putin, but Putin is a variation of many different things that they could have. And he's certainly not a hardliner in the historical context of what a Russian hardliner could be. I think Europe, just because he's a, very masculine, patriarchal leader, despises that because they despise it their own societies. I think that in the end, I think that it's been a huge mistake to try and arm Ukraine for something that was inevitably going to go the way it's gone. It's sad to see that many people get butchered, and I think that there will be a deal. I think Russia ends up keeping Donbass, and I think most of the people there are ethnic Russian anyways. And I think the world's just going to have to live with that. And there's trade-offs. We go into Iran and get rid of the bad guys there, and Russia, we give them some in their sphere of influence what they want, and the world makes an adjustment. That's might is right, and whether you like it or not, that's the way it usually plays out.
Totally agree. What about the markets? I lied. One more question. What do you see in the markets happening?
Well, I mean, technically, I think we're in a pretty good spot. We crossed the 200-day moving average on the S&P. We're still sort of around the 100-day. We've got earnings coming up shortly. To the extent that we can kind of, de-risk a little bit, thinking that I personally think, there's going to be some more headlines that are going to be, trying in the market. So I wouldn't necessarily chase the equity market right here. But it's very, if you're a very long-term oriented person, it's very cheap right now. And I think if we can get this thing behind us, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, and it's not an easy answer because it is very digital. It can go one way or the other. But I think increasingly it looks like we're going to get a good outcome with this. And if we do, I think we're sort of back to, highs in markets. I think bond markets rally. I think, we can start looking ahead at the Fed and what they're going to do, and getting rid of Powell, which is another choke point that we need to deal with.
And the elections are coming, so
which you were referencing earlier in the interim between segments, and I think it's still too early to figure out what's going on with the elections. I mean, if you just let Gavin Newsom and his wife talk a little bit more, you're taking out more Democratic potentials in the election. The guy's a total joke. And, I was watching Ro Khanna on TV, and he was talking about this wealth tax that they need to do in California. I just don't know how people are going to buy into that when they're finding $100 billion wastes. This is a joke. And I actually think that, the media most of the media will never tell you this, but I think the Democrats are facing an existential threat. I think the Overton window has shifted. This whole globalist world, WEF, DEI, ESG, all these acronyms that were listening to somebody scratch their fingers on a chalkboard, their nails on a chalkboard. I think we're moving away from that as a society. And in the West, I think people are I don't want to hear about this climate change stuff. I don't want this hanging over my head. I don't want to have to sacrifice anymore. I want more economic booms. I want the ability to consume more, earn more money and all this stuff. So I think the Democrats they don't have anything in that tent. That's not what they're about. So I would say that, making the assumption that the midterms are a done deal is not there, because people really want what the Republicans are offering more than they do what the Democrats are offering. So we'll have to, it's going to be close, but I don't think you can write it off yet, despite what the betting markets are saying.
Totally agree. All right, Tom, thanks for coming on today, man.
You got
Appreciate
it anytime.
All right.